All right. Welcome, everyone, to tonight's Holistic Perspective in Disease Prevention talk with founders of Purple Sprout Conscious Organics. We have Irina Ra and Karim Ra, also known as Dr. Nature. They are experts in the wellness field and with detox and mindful practices. And we are very excited to have them here tonight to talk about their expertise and wellness practices to support well-being. Irina is a raw food chef and also a certified yoga instructor. And Dr. Nature is a nurse practitioner, and also he also has many modalities underneath his belt in wellness. So thank you also for being here. And without further ado, please take the floor.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. We are happy to be here with you today. So thank you for taking this time out of your life to get the valuable knowledge. Let me start sharing the screen here. Okay. All right. So namaste. Thank you for joining us. In today's workshop, we'll look at common health challenges from both East and West, so you can get a more rounded, full picture. We'll cover things like heart health, digestion, inflammation, blending modern science with yogic and Ayurvedic wisdom. It will be a mix of information, discussion, practical tips, so please have paper and pen ready in case you need to jot down some important information. And our goal is to provide you with new important knowledge that can help you improve your health naturally, but also continue on your path to a more effective, efficient, and conscious way of living. Some of these concepts may seem outlandish for you, but please keep an open mind and remember that there is a lot more knowledge that in this world that we don't even know exists. So questions are welcome and encouraged so you can stay engaged and basically optimize your experience. We'll start with some breathing. Okay, so get yourself comfortable, feet on the floor, or sit in a cross-legged position, and we will do 3-part breathing. We'll engage our abdomen first, so inhale into the abdomen, then keep inhaling and fill your ribs area, and then keep inhaling and fill your chest area. So all in one long breath. And then exhale in the opposite direction. So exhale from the chest first, then ribs, then the abdomen. So let's try that, and we'll do it 3 times. Inhale into the abdomen, and expand your ribs, expand your chest. Exhale through the chest first, ribs, and the abdomen. One more time. Inhale, inhale, keep inhaling, keep your shoulders and your neck relaxed, and exhale in the opposite direction. 1, 2, 3. And one more time. And exhale at your own speed. Wonderful. You can open your eyes when you're ready. So that was full yogic breathing, and the benefits include nervous system regulation, improved cardiovascular and digestive function, and emotional balance as well. So all pertaining to the topic of our today's talk. Okay, Dr. Nature, please take away.
All right. Thank you very much. Wonderful. Breathing is always good. And breathing is where we all actually begin. Breathing is a subtle energy. We do want to master it as we go. And yoga talks about it extensively. In fact, yoga talks about many things. And the way that we look at it is not only at the level of asanas. It's more than just asanas. And this knowledge that we're going to talk about today is essential part of yoga, and any who is practicing yoga should be aware of that, and eventually, maybe not right away, but should tap into this knowledge and start practicing it as well. So Ayurveda is sister science of yoga. It's a component of Vedic knowledge that talks about the metaphysical health, the subtle health and subtle energies, which is beyond matter, quantums and metaphysics of our health and our expressions in different spectra and vibrational diapasons. All right, so Ayurveda, we'll just give you a quick description of it, and we will continue. I think that what we can do, we want to be interactive, of course. We'll do some practices as we go, but if you have questions, just write them down, and then we'll discuss them by the end of our webinar. All right? Wonderful. So what is Ayurveda? I would say Ayurveda has a couple of meanings. One is that it's the science of life. This is how it's translated from Sanskrit. But also there's another meaning to it is A is, we will transliterate it. A is either the beginning or it is the man. It is the human being. The letter A has that significance describing human being. Y in this case, or U, means at. So human being at, and then Ra, because the original way to pronounce this is Ayurveda. And aura, we all know what is aura. So it's the Veda is knowledge. It's the knowledge of aura. And within aura, we can differentiate A as human being, U means at, and Ra means the spectrum of radiance. And this is what this knowledge is about. So we are studying the different expressions, the subtle expressions, and different vibrational diapasons and different spectrums of light, and how human being is emitting them. The purpose of Ayurveda, in fact, is restore balance of the body, mind, and spirit, because, well, we do lose that balance and we need to have a tool to restore it and attain higher state of consciousness, where we actually move the center of our internal consciousness up in a different vibrational spectrum. And while we're doing that, our consciousness expands. It goes from the forming particles into forming waves, and then communicating in a wider spectrum with the universe. And that is, while doing that, we are improving our physical health and the mental health and everything there is, and we are attaining the universal field of totality. So like we are beginning to communicate with the universe more and more. Our senses become more acute, and we become more truly human-like beings, because this is our nature. The human nature is really to become best version of self and begin to be able to communicate with the universe at large. Then the three components of healing are very simple. They're etiology, and this is where we look the true reason, the true causative factor for disease formation or imbalance. We go into the root causes. The root causes are in the energies, in the quantum spectrums and quantum mechanics of our subtle bodies, and symptomology, by which we recognize, that's the second one, by which we recognize the imbalance and how it affects our being in all the planes, in the subtle plane as well as in the physical plane. However, symptoms, we usually read them of our physical body, and then we understand the imbalance. But there is a different way to understand the imbalance, is the other way around, is when you really know what the subtle disturbance is, and then you can expect what your body will manifest later. It's the true way of looking at things from the perspective down into the physical body. However, nowadays, it is the other way around. People are just looking at the body first, and then trying to understand what is the subtle difference there is. And of course, the third one is the therapeutics. And therapeutics is whatever we're trying to manage and correct, whether we're trying to work with the physical body or the root cause is, that's where we want to go in order to correct that imbalance. And whatever methods we're using, modalities we're using to do that, which can be physical, and that may be all of it that's needed, or it can be subtle, which is most important. And, more frequently, we really need to look into that. Now, the way we understand Ayurveda is, and the energies is by qualities, especially doshas. And you probably know what doshas are. Doshas is what the Ayurveda is based on. Doshas are the universal elements. There are 5 of them, and they make up 3 principles. But the doshas are negative energies. They are the energies along the female channel of energy. This is why they're dynamic, they're changing, they are unstable, and they can be modified fairly easily. Whereas the positive channel, which is the channel of consciousness or prana, is the male channel, and that is the stable, unchanged, and that would actually be a more important one to really work with. But however, Ayurveda teaches us of all of it, and we need to understand what the doshas are based on. And the way that we understand what is the energy, we understand the energy by attributes, and the qualities are the attributes of energies. So we cannot really touch energies. Well, we may when they're physical, but how do we understand them? This is important, is we understand them by qualities. There's a number of paired qualities. They're opposites of each other, and there are 10 of them. Everything else that you may think of as far as the opposite qualities, you can assign to any of these pairs. So they're subtle, gross, thick, thin, tall, short, quick, slow, light, heavy, dry, moist, cold, hot, rough, smooth, clear, cloudy, sharp, and dull. And these qualities describe the energies. And these three energies, as I said, the principles of 5 elements that are called Vata-Dosha. And Vata-Dosha is the energy of space and air, is the first one to, say, come to existence of Prana. So when Prana manifesting from Purusha and Prakriti, it brings about the energy field around it. And the first energy field, we call it Vata. Vata is the dynamics within our etheric body. And there are 5 expressions of Vata, 5 main expressions, which we're probably not going to talk today. But anyway, we want to know that this is the element of space and air cumulatively. So Vata dosha quality are dry, cold. These are 2 initial qualities. Then rough, quick, subtle, thin, clear. So any of these qualities, if you know these qualities and you find them in you, then Vata is present. They can be.
I would actually, yes, Dr. Nature, just 1 second. So as you're listening to Dr. Nature speak and you're looking at the screen, I would encourage you to see which qualities apply to you and maybe jot them down. So this is part of our practice to help you establish your own dosha.
Wonderful. So that is Vata dosha's qualities. And I can also tell that another way to understand the dosha is by how do we understand the energy of air that can actually be, part of our constitution. Is it really the air that is blowing inside our tissues, right? Well, no, not exactly. We cannot imagine air, right, or the wind blowing through our tissues. But what in this case, the understanding should be is this is the energy of conduction or transmission. Conduction, transmission. This is what it means. This is the speed and the mobility of things that are moving through our body, like our thought process, or just being quick as to move around, being uneasy, trying to be everywhere at the same time. Your thought process may be too scattered around. It's like, in maniac state. This is the Vata vitiated state. All right. So this is the Vata and its qualities. Now, next one is Pitta. Pitta is primarily fire, but it can be transient. So this energy, it connects and transforms. So it's the energy of transformation. That's how we look at it. It's not really fire burning inside of us, right? But it is the energy of transformation. So it governs certain processes. It governs digestion, primarily sensory perception, and so on. But Pitta qualities are hot, sharp, light. It's also light, but it may be heavier because, as I said, it's transient. So at the time that Pitta is transforming into Kapha, it may become a little bit slower and duller, but still have the, hot qualities. Where it is between the Vata and Pitta, it may have some element of air in it and be dry and heating and drying also. So, but these are the qualities: penetrating, it is rough, and it is flowing at the same time. And then the next one, and this, the energy of manifestation and stabilization, is Kapha. So this is when our body is really manifesting and the process is over. Now the tissue is formed, let's say, and that has the properties of cool, moist, thick, dull, smooth, soft, flowing, slow, heavy, expanding, and sticky, things like that. So this is kapha, or the element of water and earth. So these are the qualities, and if you find any qualities in your constitution or in your mind, because they also characterize the mental traits, you will know what dosha affects you. And sometimes, and the different doshas may affect our different bodies. Like a physical body can be under the effect of certain energies, certain doshas, whereas the mind may be affected by another dosha. So it's never universal. So the imbalance may be different in terms of the physical body and in terms of the mind. Yes, we can go to the next slide, I think.
Yes, trying.
All right, and here we get to talk about digestion for each dosha. You know, not too long ago, medicine was not allopathic completely. It was not the way that we know it now. It was based on more natural principles. And back then, even when I went to the nursing school back, or the physician assistant school back in my country, I actually learned this, but I didn't really know how to practically apply that. Nobody actually taught us even then of what it means. But back then, I knew that these constitutions existed, and it only kind of described the build of the body. But now I know what it really meant more.
And also, by looking at this picture, please try to notice the traits that are present in your physique. And you can have qualities or traits of one or two or several or all three of these body types.
Yeah, and
So
then
please try to note that. Mhm.
then you can kind of diagnose yourself. But of course, there's more ways to diagnose, which we'll probably not going into, but we'll focus more on digestion and so on. Okay, so I have to say at this point is that Vata-Dosha in natural medicine would be called ectomorph. This is the way I describe the constitution of Vata. The features are stretched along the vertical lines, as you see. If you see that your body is built more along the vertical lines and is stretched that way, then you know that Vata is present. And ectomorph is the way to describe that. And the digestive principle for this constitution is based on principle of gas, and we'll explain you why. Then the next one is the Pitta build, which is mesomorph, and the body features are, ratioed equally between the vertical and horizontal lines, and they like medium. That's what's particular this built. And the digestion is based on bile, the principle of bile. And then kapha dosha, they are called endomorph, and their features are stretched along the horizontal lines. They are more stout and shorter and have more bulk to their body, or substance to their body, and their digestion is based on principle of mucus. Now, as far as digestive organs, they're distributed to the doshas in the following manner. The kapha dosha supervises the oral cavity and the stomach. Stomach is the organ that digests the heavier substances like proteins. We know that because there's acidity. So stomach is pretty much the only acidic organ, and because it's kapha, that means it's more substantial. It has more tissue. It's capable of handling the acidic environment within itself. So that's the organ of kapha. And then we move on to the small intestine and liver and pancreas, of course. Those are organs under the governance of Pitta dosha. They produce enzymes. First part of the digestion is enzymic digestion that happens right past the stomach. Even in the stomach, we have some enzymes. We don't have the microflora there yet. We are digesting on our own first. We're digesting with our own enzymes, and we're using the real living enzymes of the food. If the food doesn't have enzymes, then our body has to produce more enzymes, especially acidity, which is not the best way to digest. However, we're just used to it now. And there's more to talk about that. Someday maybe we'll talk about it. But the first phase of digestion is enzymic, and that happens all the way in the small intestine, duodenum, and then in ileum, and this is going on until the lower part of the small intestine, where we begin the biotic phase. And then the biotic phase is also Pitta, since the entire small intestine is under the Pitta dosha, is still considered to be digestive fire, is then being supplemented by the bacterial digestion. The less we digest with our own enzymes, the more we'll have to digest with the help of the supplemental bacteria, which is the microbiome. And then the Vata organ is the large intestine. This is where the water is absorbed, and this is why Vata is dry and cold, remember? So since it's Vata organ, it will be prone to develop and these features of dryness and cold, and this is why there's no water anymore. And by drying the food essence, it forms the stool. And if the Vata organ is overvitiated, then we are forming drier stools, hotter stools. Remember those qualities? Drier, hotter, and then we may end up with constipation. So constipation is one of the symptoms of the Vata vitiation inside the large intestine. Now moving on to what is the disease and what are the roots. Allopathic medicine is the Western medicine, is the modern medicine, the way we know it. Let's see how do we give it a definition. So what is the allopathic medicine? What it is pursuing? In allopathic medicine, disease means an alternation in the state of the body or of the sum of its organs, or mental disorder interrupting or disabling the performance of the functions, causing pain and weakness or other abnormal physical and mental conditions. Also, I would have to say that allopathic medicine focuses on physical body more and considers the physical body the basis for the biochemical processes. So, and analyzes, dissects, and studies the physical body, considering or implying that physical body is the basis for life and existence. We really have achieved a spectacular stage in the modern Western medicine where we know every little substance, but there's a lot more that we don't know because we cannot catch all the transient forms of enzymes or hormones inside our body. So that's still kind of dark area for the medicine. They cannot explain a lot of psychological processes there either. But we really have broken down the physical body to such a basic components that, and explain so many things. And that has certain validity in it. And it is actually a good thing to study physical body, which can be perceived by our five senses. And of course, because we cannot perceive the subtle realm that easily because our senses don't allow us to, this is why the medicine kind of denies that segment. But to whatever our senses do allow us, we've analyzed the physical body thoroughly, fairly, and it really does help in many cases. So what Ayurveda does in this respect is that it considers that disease happens when the mind and senses are imbalanced, that doshas are vitiated from their natural state, and I'm talking about energies, as well as the consciousness is affected by a certain state and dependent on the senses that affect the state of consciousness. But Ayurveda also considers that physical body is not the basis for existence. It is the latest manifestation of the subtle realms and the trends that then pretty much just are harnessed by the physical matter. So it's like a vessel to the more subtle expressions of human being, and that all biochemical processes, they happen for the reason of the mental energies to manifest the physical body, not the other way around. So this is the perspective of Ayurveda. And what we want to do is to understand this balance, the potency of these processes, and balance them in order to achieve the most harmonious state between physical body, which is the vessel for the energies themselves, and the consciousness, so that we have a better chance to allow our consciousness to ascend and expand. And then factors for the root causes, those that may not be very well observed in the physical manifested reality, but they are implicit in the subtle trends. And all those disturbances and imbalances, they begin first in the mind. How do they do that? Is because our mind is prone to negative, well, I wouldn't say negative, but it's prone to attachments and to aversions based on the previous experiences. And this is what lays the foundation for diseases. How it does it, it is the way to discuss, and we'll probably touch a little bit on it as we go. So let's discuss the digestion.
The next, yes, I'm sorry, the next few slides will talk about the different digestive challenges associated with each dosha and the type of stools that are inherent in that dosha. So please also jot down what applies to you.
And see what type of digestion is descriptive of you, and then maybe just write it down. And if you have questions, then we can discuss them. All right, so Vata digestion, a principle of guess. As we know, the main organ of digestion for Vata is the large intestine. Qualities of Vata condition features of digestion, of course. So our digestion in this case is dry and cold. This is number one. What does this mean? When we say dry digestion, that means that we do not naturally, and it's not by any chance or by any like specifically health condition, but naturally the individual is incapable of producing the adequate amount of digestive juices, either in the stomach or in the small intestine, and because of that, they cannot digest the food well. Also, the digestion is rough because of that, right? Because when there is no lubrication, yet to say no digestive power, then the food becomes rough, moves roughly through the digestive tract. If it is vitiated, if there is a more significant lack of the digestive enzymes, then it may just shut down completely and develop constipation. But usually, if the person is eating, and this individual would actually eat smaller portion more frequently, maybe having more water and so on. And if that's the case, then usually the stool would be hard, as hard as it would actually form hard and dry pellets moving through the large intestine. And the conditions that this constitution may develop. And if you see these conditions, then you would automatically know which dosha is present in that digestion is the IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, or anxious bowel, especially if we talk about the emotional state of these doshas, and if the person is prone to anorexia or anxiety, worry, fear, decreased appetite, malnourishment, this is what we would be observing. So, and then they would produce a lot of gas because the food is not being digested, and that will produce a lot of abdominal pain too, and gas formation. This is how we know what conditions the principle of this digestion. Intolerance to heavier food and to drier food. This constitution is prone to systemic stone formation because of dryness and coolness. They would form calcifications quicker and easier within their blood circulation, within their kidneys and liver, and then that would
Gallbladder.
Yes, dyspepsia, dysbiosis, bacteria is low, the enzymic production is low, the microbiome is scarce, and just because of the roughness, the hemorrhoid may occur. So what we want to do to balance this, we want to do digestive support. Of course, the way we do it is by introducing the unctuous and warm nutrition that has enough of moisture in it, and digestive spices, warming spices versus cooling spices. Tastes that we recommend is salty and sour foods, and I will explain that to you why. Small amounts of foods that are easy to digest, and maybe supplementation for the bacteria, so propionic bacteria, to replenish the microbiome. Some enzymic supplementation too. Just generally, the type of food that would be good for this constitution is amino acids. Now, it's not just proteins, and proteins we really need to carefully use this word because it's not proteins that we need, but we need amino acids. This is the best way to describe the need of the body for the proteins. It's not a complete protein that we need. We need only 9 essential amino acids, but this constitution really does need nutrition that offers that type of nourishment. And then essential fractions of fat, like fat-based vitamins and enzymes.
Can you please name those? Like D3,
I'm sorry?
vitamin D.
Yes, vitamin D, vitamin K, vitamin E, vitamin A, and then essential omega, especially omega-3, and then well-ratioed omega-3 with omega-6. Omega-9 is not very much essential, but yes, those fats are very important, good for this constitution. Carbohydrates, as far as fruit, for example, and raw food, another category of nutrition when we talk about physical nutrition versus the energy. If the individual, this constitution, does not practice any energy routines, then they might not be very well suitable to eat raw food, because in this case, the raw food that possesses a lot of prana will turn into more vata. And in this case, the person will be way too vitiated and will be depleting all the way to debilitating state. We may see people who go on raw food become very exhaustively cahexic, just like skeletons. And this is the trap for people who do not know how to convert energies. Okay.
Yes, and examples of energy conversion practices are yoga, of course, Tai Chi, Qigong, and meditation, but not any type of meditation, not meditation on love, not visualizing your dream place. No, it has to be Vipassana meditation that helps to get rid of samskaras or those karmic knots in the energy body.
That can ignite chi and conduct mental energy. This is very important because prana has components inside of it, and the first component may convert into vata, but we don't want it to convert into vata, and this is why we need to ignite the chi energy. To do so, we need these energy practices, because if we fail to ignite chi component of prana, then the first component of prana will turn into vata. This is very elaborate conversation and topic, which is very captivating. This actually shows the connection between the mental body and the physical body, gross body, etheric, mental, and the gross body, and how they work with energies properly. So this is very essential. It connects to food, and it explains how we are dependent either on prana in raw foods or on more physical food, which is more expressed in the substance, the physical matter type of food. Okay, so next one is pitta digestion, or principle of bile. So the qualities of pitta, and we've mentioned them, they would condition the features of digestion, and the imbalances or symptoms or diseases that would come out of it would be ulcers, gastric ulcers, hyperacidity, too many enzymes, too much, too strong juices, overproduction of them. They are always hungry. They can digest pretty much anything. They eat quickly, they gulp, they don't chew, especially if they are impatient and rough and sharp at points, even aggressive. And this is what actually can precondition the way that they eat. If they're balanced, they are straightforward, intellectual, compassionate. But if they are out of balance, they would be irritable or angry, possessing very high sense of hunger. Because of that, they tend to overeat. Their metabolism is quick though too, but slowly and gradually they would start packing on weight. So by middle age, pack on pounds and certain pitta conditions too. Crohn's disease, liver is overstimulated, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, because yes, the enzymes and bacteria and inflammatory markers would also be high. Diarrhea, the quality of their stool, liquid to soft and hardly formed. Then they would develop acid reflux and any sort of inflammatory conditions of their digestive tract. What do we do to balance them? We want to introduce cooling digestive spices. Then we want to now and then give them raw vegetables and raw fruit because they're cooling, because prana component is cold. Their hot state of digestion, we want to cool it down and purify it of that heat and acidity. And the bitter spices, astringent tastes, and raw prana containing vegetables and fresh fruit can do that nicely. Then we want to do the seasonal detoxes with them, seasonal nutrition. For example, during summer, they would be eating cooling foods and bitter foods, while during winter, they would benefit from heavier foods. This is the time that they can nurture more. Appetite curbing practices and herbs, and just being able to be responsible not to vitiate their imbalances. and their mind is such that they catch on to their imbalance quickly, and the imbalance starts driving their mind. Like vitiates like, somebody who is Pitta wants to be more Pitta. In fact, each and every dosha acts like that. The slower people want to be slower. Naturally, they're just prone to roll on with the dynamics of their imbalance. The balancing way is to counterpart that dynamic. This is what Pitta digestion is. They definitely benefit from raw food more than Vata-Dosha, but the rules of conversion of prana into chi would remain the same. Because when we're talking about prana and converting energy, we're talking about not the dosha channel, but about the consciousness channel, the prana channel. That is stable and it applies to any dosha. As long as we can and learn to work with the prana, we can forget about doshas because they will balance themselves. This is this wonderful secret of energies. If you're working with your consciousness and raising that and converting the energy of the positive channel, the doshas will balance themselves, and you will not have to tweak them and change them and modify them day in and day out. You can only work with the positive channel, and negative channel will follow. It's like male and female. Wherever male goes, female follows. Kapha digestion. And it is called kapha, not kapha, because Sanskrit does not really pronounce the sound F. There's piha, so kapha, this is the way to pronounce this diphthong of pH, and this is the principle of mucus. So the overproduction of mucus, because the main organ is stomach, and stomach is prone to produce a lot of mucus in order to protect its layers from the acidity of the hydrochloric acid, and it actually digests the proteins. The proteins are disassembled in the stomach with the help of hydrochloric acid and enzyme pepsin, the strongest enzyme to digest the protein. Trypsin, which is then secreted in the small intestine by pancreas, is not as potent to work on proteins, and the digestion in small intestine is alkaline, and therefore proteins will have a least chance to get disassembled totally, and this actually can give the rise to the toxin formation. So, and this is why we should be very careful with proteins. The proteins are needed, but the way that we should eat them should be really mindful and well understood. Qualities of kapha, condition features of digestion here, and we see those qualities here too. Cool, moist, thick, dull, slow, heavy. Conditions are low acidity. Why is it low acidity? Because of the mucus. Too much mucus. Conditions low enzymic production. Pretty much like in Vata, low enzymes, but this time it is because they're diluted. There's too much of mucus or watery. They're watery. And this is why they would also be less potent. And this is why it actually the other extreme of the opposite side and overstagnated, because kapha does not like to let go. It accumulates, it conditions these states. Diverticulosis, pouching of large intestine. Leaky gut, this is a very important one to know too, because once the leaky gut forms, then some improperly digested food, some fragments of proteins, for example, that are undigested all the way down to amino acids, would be able to penetrate in blood circulation, to begin forming the inflammation. Larger particles penetrate in the circulation, and they are not yet nutrients, but they're still fragmental and complex. They would start causing allergic reactions, start posing the threat of being antigen versus a nutrient. And for any antigen, we will produce antibody, right? And this is the basis for inflammation. We'll talk about it in a little bit. Candida, and because of the stagnation, because of the moisture and warmth inside our intestine, and a lot of undigested matter and waste products, the fungal infection, opportunistic infection will start growing, and Candida one of them, that especially grows in the intestinal tract, and then it becomes systemic, which is then very hard to get rid of. And that allows any other bacteria and infection get inside the body, as well as the molds and fungi of different sort. Sluggishness, sluggish digestion, slow digestion, buildup of the, and in this case, the constipation will be by impaction state, not because of the hard stools and dry, but because of the bulky stools will just block and stagnate and impact the bowels. Heaviness after food, nausea, and this is the response of the stomach because stomach overwhelmed, nausea, burping, and bloating. Now, when bloating in Vata is based on trapped air, roaming air inside the intestines, the bloating in Kapha type is watery, so it's like feeling of jitterness inside the intestine. So this is the type of bloating that Kapha develops. Well, let me mention also some emotional states. These are emotional eaters. They often become sad and they develop the emotional eating. They develop strong attachments to food. It replaces them feeling of love and satisfy their emotions. Lymphatic stagnation, because lymphatic system is also kapha, that follows, and lymphedema and obesity even. This is what goes on with them. But when they're balanced, they have cheerful disposition, they project love, very kind and compassionate emotions, they're huggers, and also the stronger the kapha in the neurological tissue, the quicker their mind works, the more they like to communicate, and they're actually great communicators too. Whereas vata, they be more like on a quiet side and they're not very talkative. But kapha would be chattering. And balancing measures for these doshas would be active lifestyle, practice of letting go. They would definitely be able to withstand longer periods of fasting, and raw food would actually be good for them, balancing too, and cleansing. Smaller, if they prefer like smaller portions, they need to actually be on smaller portions, and they are on smaller portions because they cannot tolerate large portions, and therefore they prefer eating smaller meals but more frequently, which should not be the case. They should actually be eating less frequently. And then heating spices, this is what we want to do. We want to stimulate the enzyme production, and we also want them to have more balanced microbiome. So pungent taste and astringent and bitter taste would actually be very helpful in their case. And they can also benefit from dryness, like dry saunas and lymphatic massage, lymphatic drainage. So that would be something balancing for Kapha dosha. Now, digestion and mental health. Well, other neurotransmitters that are mentioned here that are produced in our intestines and that affect our mind. The first trend to describe this connection would actually be mental attachments and aversions. For example, in Kapha, the emotional state where they are attached to that, the attachment, the craving, this is what imbalances them first, because once the trend in the mind is such that they crave, they cannot resist mental vitiation. All of a sudden, they feel need to eat, even though they need some attention, compassion, and they're not receiving that. Then, instead of seeking for that type of emotional support and psychological help, they resort to their attachment and they begin eating sweets, because sweet is the taste of love, let's say. And this is the first distortion that happens, and it happens in the mind. This is where it is rooted. This is a very subtle connection, a subtle thing in our subconsciousness. This is where the distortion is lodged. That activates and instigates the sensation inside the body. And then that sensation affects the mind, or it awakens the emotion first. Emotions are awakened in the chakras, and then they're interpreted in the limbic system of our brain. And our limbic system is not where subconsciousness really resides. It's just the interpretation of the trends in subconsciousness, which is in fact the entire body. The entire body will also, there's a slide, even though we talk very superficially about it, and then the mind catches on this trend of emotion and interprets it the way that it wants to pursue some action or reaction to this emotion. And usually, as the trend is formed, it is the attachment engaging in some sort of activity. If we're balanced, then we get the good neurotransmitters. This is where we can say it's like psychosomatic interaction. Neurotransmitters are produced in our intestine, and there's some neurotransmitters that can make our mind sluggish, and some can make our mind happy and focused, and so on.
Yeah, so let's talk about chakras, and these concepts can be viewed from the standpoint of chakras. And if you practice yoga or asanas or meditations, this will be pretty understandable for you because you're probably used to some of these terms and concepts. So looking at digestion and digestive issues from the standpoint of yoga, of course, the first thing that comes to mind is the solar plexus chakra. but not only. So the other two of the lower chakras, the root chakra and the sacral chakra, they also are very much at play when it comes to digestive imbalances. So imbalances in all of these three chakras lead to a variety of health issues, including digestive, inflammatory, and heart challenges that are actually the focus of our today's workshop. So let's start with Muladhara, or the root chakra. The colors are different in various systems. So here we're just using some of the most widespread, more acceptable versions when it comes to primary sources of yoga and Ayurveda. Okay, so the main motivation is to survive. And the root chakra is located at the base of the spine, but inside the body. Some people can feel their chakras more along the frontal part of the body or the east side of the body, as yogis would say, right? Some people can feel them more in the back or in the west side of their body. So if you want to close your eyes for a second and go down to the base of your spine and try to feel that chakra. So it's the center of stability. So if your head is the center of stability, then then we may be dealing with some hot-headedness or some other situation. So it's ideal if your center of balance and stability is in the root chakra. You can probably feel it, right? So the safety of self and the loved ones are the main priority for people who are primarily existing at the level of Muladhara. It's a very important chakra, so there is nothing to be ashamed of. I know that nowadays people are generally claiming to be, especially people who are spiritual seekers or practicing yoga, they tend to think of them as being at the heart chakra level. The root chakra needs to be strong. And just like with every chakra, there are some positive traits and there are some negative traits. There are some neutral traits that can go either way, depending on how you're using them, what kind of purpose and with what kind of intent. So, for example, physical health. Are we using it to work at a meat factory, for example? Then there will be a lot of karmic repercussions. But if we're using physical health to promote consciousness, work long hours and travel and do a lot of workshops on yoga and meditation and things like that, then it becomes a very positive trait. Usually, very little attention is paid to the quality of food or conscious existence with people who are at this level of chakra. Irritability and anger that are frequently displayed by such personalities, they impact digestion, which leads to inflammation, of course, and contributes to heart diseases. Short-tempered people often like very spicy foods that further imbalance the state of health. So think about it for a second. See if any of these traits apply to you. Do you have a lack of patience, or are you, on the other hand, very patient? And another positive trait of these people is that they have, at the very best, when they have a lot of patience, they have great propensity for austerities. So they can fast, they can endure a lot of austerities. Okay, balancing techniques, conscious practice in maintaining composure, going out in nature, listening to singing mantras, deep relaxation or meditation, reading scriptures, looking at sacred images of some sort, divine forms, deities, providing service for the community. Physical labor. This is really recommended, especially for people with hot temperament. So if you feel like something is surging inside of you, so instead of pouring this out on your loved ones or your colleagues at work, it's better to do some physical activities, especially if it's going to benefit others. A hot and cold contrast shower is another great idea. And of course, shatkarmas, or cleansing procedures. That's the yogic term for it, shatkarmas, such as Shanka Prakshalana is the saltwater flush that we actually practice a lot within our detox program. Okay, so now let's talk about Svadhisthana and Manipura. And these are the second and the third chakra. So imbalances in both of these chakras result in food attachments, but there is a difference. At the Svadhisthana chakra, there is an attachment to taste. At Manipura, it's the volume of food. So Svadhisthana is located 2 inches below the belly button, approximately 3 fingers. So if you want to do that, try to feel that chakra. Take a second. So our current world is based on this level of chakra. The incredible amount of food choices, different cuisines and tastes, cooking methods and variety of dishes, beautiful plating, cooking shows, chef challenges, restaurants, social gatherings, traveling, various sports events, and even many yoga and meditation retreats, they all center around food. Even some religions are centered around food. And of course, sadly, but the majority of people exist in this realm, and it is very difficult to get out of it. And elevating along the chakram, so basically raising your vibrations, that's what it means to raise your vibrations, is to ascend up the chakram. And then a person's further inner growth mainly depends on whether the person is able to break free from this Svadhisthana's food captivity. And because majority of the foods that people consume are processed and denatured, people start experiencing a whole host of health issues. Again, digestive, inflammatory, heart conditions. Please see if any of these qualities apply to you. Do you like to socialize? Or are you, on the other hand, tend to be depressed and frequently stressed out? Do you tend to change partners a lot? Or do you have an attachment to tasty foods? Do you get hurt easily? Do you experience a lot of sadness and self-pity? Or do you have strong passions and desires? So this would be pretty much neutral qualities. Again, it depends on how you are applying your passions and desires. Is it to obtain more material things for yourself? Or is it more in the line of sharing knowledge with others so that other people can experience some inner growth as well? Just wanted to mention as well that the main motivation for people at Svadhisthana chakra is to be liked and to be regarded as special. And they can be great leaders too. Manipura chakra, you can feel it. Yeah, there is a little mistake here. So it's the solar plexus area. And I'm sure that you felt it before, especially if you do yoga. Manipura chakra is considered to be the center of transformation. This is fire center in the body. Digestive fires are dwelling in that area as well.
The organs that are connected to it are pancreas, liver, and small intestine.
Yes.
That's where, yes.
So at this level, people start being less concerned about the taste, but now they focus rather on the volume of the food. So this mostly comes from an agitated mind, maybe unfulfilling life, some emotional challenges. But on the other hand, evolution-wise, it is a step up from Svadhisthana. Again, there is no bad chakra. All of them are extremely important. We want every single chakra to be strong. That's why we're talking about these things here. So at this level, we also see a lot of spiritual seekers and healthy living advocates who start to walk away from low vibrational, unhealthy foods, but now need greater volume of food to balance out the lack of experiences that they used to have before. At this point, they still don't have the tools to pacify the mind, or maybe they have the tools but are not yet skilled at these practices. So, and mind pacifying tools again are yoga, meditation primarily, and of course, again, shat karmas, so, or cleansing rituals, extremely important, not just from the physical aspect, but they benefit the mind and any sort of spiritual development or inner growth, whatever you want to call it. Apply this to yourself. See if you possess any of these qualities, such as greed. It can also be intellectual greed. Do you want to learn more and more and more and more? Do you find yourself constantly studying, soaking more information and more information, but not really practicing it? So are you just collecting knowledge? So another manifestation would be, I want this and I want this now. So that's how you know that you are at this level. On the other hand, people can be very selfless and have a strong will, strong determination, and they can be very charismatic, great leaders, especially at this chakra. So since Manipur is considered to be the center of transformation, we need to invest ourselves into practicing asanas, meditation, and more sattvic or conscious nutrition at this level.
Emotional ascension through the chakras happens from anger, let's say at the lowest level, which is the Muladhara chakra, then sarcasm in Swadhisthana chakra, and then pitifulness in Manipura chakra, and then compassion. This is the way you can transform the energy from the negative to positive. Anger, you can transform it into some sort of humor. Sarcasm is downward going, and positive constructive humor is upward going. So Swadhisthana is very dynamic in this way. So what you can do is to take the subject of your anger and just laugh at it, make fun of it, and then transform it into pitifulness, which is the Manipura chakra. And this is where we are now, even though the most of the trends are connected to Swadhisthana chakra, but this world is really in the spectrum of Manipura chakra, because sun is the yellow dwarf, and we are in this spectrum of cosmos. And this is why we're given the chance of ascension. Most of the souls that come to this planet are based on Swadhisthana, but they are given the chance to ascend into the next realm, which is the money. Many times we think of compassion, we mix the compassion and pitifulness, but it's okay. Pitifulness is the next step, drifting away from anger and from sarcasm. Then the next step would actually be compassion towards that person, the living being, whatever it is. This is how we can transform the energy from negative to positive, giving an opportunity for this energy to channel and not to bounce back, rebound, and harm us and others around. And this is our responsibility to be able to transform this energy.
Anahata, which is the heart chakra, where everybody wants to be, right? And the main motivation is to love and accept. Anahata people are highly sensitive, who often empathize with others. So this is not exactly compassion yet, because compassion is a little higher. This would be the Vishuddha or the throat chakra. And compassion more is about seeing the plight of people and doing something to help them. For example, lectures on consciousness. Anahata is more about sharing in other people's feelings and emotions, being present in their energy field. So when we consider the whole range of qualities, if you look here from jealousy on the negative side of the spectrum to gratitude, we get a pretty ambiguous mixed picture. So again, very important chakra, you cannot bypass it, but yogis, usually very advanced practitioners, they recommend not to dwell in that chakra. This whole bouquet of emotions, especially if people can't remain even-keeled or level-headed, can be quite imbalancing, which contributes to the onset of all kinds of health issues, even digestive issues, heart issues. So they're all linked to too many emotions. So I remember my experience. It was probably 12 years ago when I was very active in body and brain yoga, or Dan yoga, which was an absolutely mind-opening experience for me. I started empathizing with mothers who had sick children, or feeling Mother Earth. So I could literally feel with every cell in my body, every fiber of my soul, I could feel Mother Earth's plight. Everything that humankind is doing to her, I could feel it, and I just couldn't stop crying. Look at these qualities and see which ones apply to you, if any. Remedy here is composure and balanced mind to be able to digest the poisons of realities of today's world. And such karmas or cleansing techniques as kunjala in yogic terms and vamana in Ayurvedic terms, which is basically vomiting, helps with all sorts of emotional predicaments, so to say. Okay.
All right, wonderful. We'll probably not get into the higher chakras at this point, so maybe we'll leave them another time. Let's continue talking about digestion. Please go back one slide. You've missed that. Yes, right here. A very important thing to mention is about parasites. Talking about digestion, a significant essential part in general condition of the body, inflammation, and everything else. Parasites are connected to pretty much all diseases that manifest through the body. The digestive tract is imbalanced, and a lot of toxins, stagnated matter is formed, metabolic waste that disrupts the GI tract function and allows parasitic invasion. So the hierarchy of parasites as follows. First come parasitic worms, intestinal worms we call them, but they're not really intestinal, they are all body worms, because they can penetrate and affect each and every tissue and any organ. They're pretty much swimming inside human body like fish in the aquarium. They can get into the brain. They can they can lay their eggs there. The eggs will go through cycles of growing into larva. Larva will hatch, and then the specimens will grow in organs, in brain, along the lymphatic vessels, in the muscle tissue, inside the liver and other organs, inside the lungs. There are different types of parasites out there, and if we do not take care of this problem, most likely we may be affected by them. The ways that the modern medicine is tracking them is really ineffective. Some diagnostic techniques may be effective, but they're very expensive and they're just not prescribed by practitioners. The modern medicine kind of ignores this problem, but it is there and it is very considerable. We have some videos that are issued. You may watch them. We talk extensively on type of parasites, the organs that they affect, and how to diagnose them. And here's the hierarchy of parasites. If we have the virome, indwelling virome, and most of us do, if we have molds and fungi, chances that we have invasion of gross parasites, the helminths and worms, is almost 100%. First, we have worms, then we have the single cell parasites like Giardia and Protoplasma, and then we have the indwelling bacteria, and then we have molds, fungi, then we have viruses. And the virome, which is indwelling inside of our organs, inside those cysts, is a great concern. And if we want to have better practice, if we want to improve our physical health, mental health, we definitely need to overcome this situation. Now we will talk about tastes. As you remember, we recommended certain tastes for certain doshas. What are the tastes and how they are comprised and what they're dependent on? Everything in our environment are based on energies, and the tastes are based on energies too. So there are 6 basic tastes. They're bitter, astringent, pungent, salty, sour, sweet, from the lightest to the heaviest. And this is how they refer to the elements. So the bitter taste is space and air. It's the most reducing and cleansing taste. So any bitter herb would actually be cleansing, purifying, and to certain individuals it may be vitiating. But medications, even, they taste bitter. Why would they taste bitter and why would they produce effect? Is because they're cleansing. The standard medication that possesses the bitter taste would actually be cleansing. This is pretty much the fundamental principle of medications. When the person is sick and they are taking bitter medications, it's not because the certain other medication effect that produces the change, but the bitterness itself that is purifying to the body. Then the astringent test is very controversial. It's air and earth. As you see, there is no fire component. That means that this is very rough taste. On one hand, it's light, and on the other, it's heavy. So this is also cleansing and purifying taste. For example, legumes, they'd be astringent. But why would they be astringent? And when would they be astringent? Only in preserved state, in conserved state. The next one is the pungent taste based on air and fire elements. That is already heavier taste. Of course, now we know that it is hot and spicy, and that is supportive of digestion and metabolic activity. The salty taste is fire and water, governs the sense of taste. Then sour taste consists of fire and earth. The sweet taste is earth and water. There's no fire. It's cooling, it's nurturing, it's the heaviest of all. If you know your energies, then you will know what taste to choose in order to balance and how to create your plate based on the taste. It may not mean very much as what ingredients you choose, but what taste those ingredients possess in order to find place on your plate to balance you. This is the basic principle. All right, so what we recommend as to balancing techniques, well, in this case regarding nutrition, for Vata-Dosha, tastes and spices. So tastes, as you see, for Vata-Dosha would be sweet, which is most nurturing for Vata-Dosha, but sweet taste doesn't have the fire element. What does this mean? Is that it may still be kind of challenging for Vata-Dosha because of the lack of the enzymes to digest it. And this is why it should always come with an ingredient that has the fire element in it, like salt, some sour products, some maybe fermented foods actually would be excellent. And then we may avoid or reduce the amount of bitter, astringent, and pungent. Even though pungent, we can add to sweet, sweet and sour, for example, sweet and pungent taste. We can mix that for better absorption. That actually can help balance the vata. And then the list of spices as you go, they are gentle spices. They're not very heating, but rather say warming. And if they're heating, for example, like cinnamon may be more heating than it's warming then, but it also has the quality of sweetness in it. Remember cinnamon? It's heating, but at the same time, it's kind of sweet. There you know what elements are already present in it. So cinnamon would be something that actually can balance Vata-Dosha. Majoram, it's pretty heating, or oregano is heating, but if you mix it with, say, some cooler spices like spearmint, that actually can balance it better and be more appropriate. So we want to file down the hot edge of it and balance it to a more acceptable state of the potency. And small amounts, cilantro is too cooling. With the cilantro, we can add ginger, small amount of horseradish. Why? Anything that's heating may actually produce dryness. Fire being vitiated, once it's very high, then it produces dryness. And we don't want the fire to produce dryness because vata will be deranged by dryness. Think qualitatively. This is the real Ayurvedic way of understanding these things. Avoid nightshades. We want to avoid nightshades. All right, so for Pitta nutrition, this is what we suggest is to balancing taste would be sweet, but sweet would actually be nurturing for Pitta. And sweet, we need to separate two very important things here, carbohydrates and proteins. We can say that proteins can be considered to be sweet, even though they don't really possess the sweetness, but they're heavy and they're of kapha quality. The real kapha is not the carbohydrate. The real kapha is protein. Grains and legumes, if you want to have them in your nutrition, should actually be sprouted, not even soaked. Soak is okay, well, it kind of releases the lectins, but sprouting them would actually be the right way to go. I guess this topic deserves more attention, and with the limited time that we have now, I don't think we should go into details, which I've already kind of done. Taste to avoid would be definitely those tastes that possess the fire element, and which is pungent, of course, sour and salty, yes. And sweet would actually be nurturing, and that would be appropriate for winter with a little bit of maybe salty taste, because that has a little water in it too, and fire. For winter, it's okay for even pittas, but if the pitta is over vitiated, then even in winter, it would not be good to have sweet. It would actually be good to have like bitter taste, which is cleansing and which is better for pitta during summer. So during summer, pitta actually can benefit from bitter and astringency. And the list of spices here are the type of spices that are cooling in their nature too. They may possess a little bit of fire component in them, but mostly they're cooling, like lavender, rose, lotus seeds, a little bit of turmeric because it's drying and astringent, lemon, herb, fennel, dill, coriander, chamomile, catnip. They're cooling, well balancing for pitta. Small amounts of those a little bit warmer spices and something to avoid. And we always say avoid nightshades, because nightshades, even though they may taste good, they may carry that spice component and have flavor, but they're shutting down to the mental channels. They're clogging, they're burning, they are shutting them down. So for good meditation experience, we do not recommend nightshades. We've never done it, even when we had purple sprout, we've never used them. We never used peanuts, we never used mushrooms are medicinal. We don't consider them nutrition. But okay, so peanuts and nightshades would probably be more important in that term. All right, the next one is kapha nutrition and spices. The balancing tastes would be bitter, pungent, and astringent. So we can go to the next slide, please. Something to avoid would be sour and sweet and salty. So we don't want the heavier tastes. We want lighter taste and hot taste. Something that invigorates and energizes, stimulating. Kapha, because it's stagnating and lazy and dull, we want to poke it up and hello.
Yes, I'm restarting.
Okay, and the list of spices would be heating spices like dry ginger And a lot of those spices that have been mentioned for Vata-Dosha, because they're heating, horseradish, an excellent spice, especially for mental kapha, for some mental sluggishness. All you can do is just inhale freshly grated horseradish, and that will provide the mental stimulation for the entire day. That's kapha. And please take a picture of this one here. Bitter and astringent tastes are very cleansing, so maybe for winter it's not the best, but for spring, because spring is kapha season, this is where we see bloom of nature and activation of motherly energies, of earthly energies. This is where we want to go on balancing nutrition, introducing pungent, bitter, and astringent. Even the nature itself provides those states by nature, because we don't have sweet fruit yet. We have pungent and bitter herbs growing in spring and religious lands. This is what we really want to be in harmony with, attuned to, and just go with nature. And this is the best time for cleansing and detox. All right, so food and taste ratios. Here we have Vata plate, Pitta plate, and Kapha plate. Remember what I said about grains and legumes? Here for Vata plate, we want some heaviness. If we choose grains and legumes, should be sprouted. We really want to sprout our grains and legumes. Even a little bit. Once they start hatching, germinating, this is the perfect time. You don't have to wait until that germinates to a whole sprout. And then if you prefer cooking them, then you can cook them that way with spices. So same applies to nuts and seeds. We either want to soak them well, or better yet, go with the sprouted seed and nut butters. Without having to go through this ordeal of sprouting them on your own, you can purchase, and even though they're expensive, but they're worth it. You don't have to eat too much of it, but this is the right form of having nuts and seeds, is when they sprouted and ground into butter. Now, as far as the taste palette, the graphs for each dosha, as to what percentage of each taste would be recommended to see on the plate for each dosha. And this is just a general ratio for, it's not specific to seasons, but you can understand what would be the trend for the season. Each season you want to act as we've discussed it previously. Because winter is Vata vitiating, so we want the heaviness and the warmth. For Pitta, summer is vitiating, so we want the coolness for summer and more nurture for winter. And for Kapha, we want balance it during springtime. All right, so at this point, I think we are going into inflammation. We'll have just a quick word about inflammation and then cardiovascular conditions.
We have this slide.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. The raw and cooked. Okay. So the difference, which, you may consider, raw food is the energy food and cooked food is the matter. So it's like energy versus matter, and our metabolism and digestion will depend on these two principles, because it's easy to convert energy to energy. It is hard to convert matter into energy, and this will define the metabolic mode for our system. And we don't have just one metabolic mode. We have more than that. However, Western medicine only views one and does not deviate from that. And we have different ways to synthesize energy, and that will depend on the energy. And this is why energy practice is very important here too. So that was the main stipulation for raw versus the cooked food segment. But here we're in inflammation. So what is inflammation? What are the roots of the inflammation? Is the internal pollution and stagnation of metabolic wastes, exogenous toxins that affect our day-to-day life, like environmental pollution, is significant, of course, and we want to take all measures to prevent that. But endogenous pollution, we want to understand where the inflammation comes from. Inflammation is the culprit. This is where a lot of conditions stem out of, and truly, inflammation lays base for autoimmune conditions and for oncological conditions even. Inflammations come from parasites, from infections, and so on. But really, where's the roots of inflammation? Inflammation is the war between the antigen and antibody. If we have the antigen, that means that we have some xenobiotics, the foreign body inside of our system. And foreign body can be presented by any pretty much substance that is alien to our system, that our system is trying to somehow reject and get rid of by all possible means. So what can pose that substance agent, the factor, the inflammatory factor? Number one, protein structures like cellular debris, immune cells that have died because they neutralize the infection. The infection itself, virus, bacteria, molds that have died inside our body, but were not timely eliminated because the elimination system was not adequate and active enough and did not have a chance to do the adequate job to remove, functionalize all this stagnation, conjugate all these xenobiotics, and then eliminate them through the open, appropriately elimination pathways, because we do not support this elimination process, because we are in the mode of assimilation. So our metabolic activity has two modes. It has the mode of assimilation and mode of elimination. If we emphasize the mode of assimilation, then we slow down the mode of elimination. It's imbalanced in terms of ratio. If we are eating 2-3 times a day, our elimination is slow. And those waste products at the cellular level accumulate. The indigenous toxins inside the cell, intracellular toxins and debris accumulate. The mitochondria stops functioning properly. And then interstitial spaces become overwhelmed with foreign bodies and debris. The body, in attempt to keep the blood circulation pure, because it cannot jeopardize the purity of the blood, because otherwise then we develop fever, we have the altered mental state and so on. It will by all means keep the blood pure by either, well, if it has the chance, removing toxins from the body, metabolic wastes that become toxic, salts of heavy metals, proteoglycans, proteolipids, different bonds of toxins, or it will pack them inside the tissues and keep them there until the opportune moment comes where it can start pulling them from the tissues back into circulation through the lymphatic system and into the external environment when we give it a chance. Usually we hardly give it a chance, or we never give it full, good, complete chance to get rid of those toxins, and they accumulate within our organs and tissues. And once they accumulate, they can either be dispersed, they can proliferate the tissue, cause the systemic inflammation, they can be localized and secluded within the cysts and pockets of pus and decay within the internal organs, like lung abscess or empyema of the lungs, or brain cysts, or the female reproductive system, like ovarian cysts, and pretty much in any organ, decaying debris, the cellular debris, encapsulated. This is what the body wants, encapsulates it and holds it there until, like I said, it has the chance to get rid of it. But while that is being held inside the body, it serves the base for oxidation and free radical formation. So this becomes acidity, and it invites opportunistic infection, and then mutation and autoimmune condition, and consequent mutation of the surrounding tissue in the process of mitosis, where the cell reproduces itself with already mutated errors within its reproduction. A lot of cancer and oncology now, due to fungal infection, and fungi only come where there is favorable environment, and this is the favorable environment. What do? Fungi and molds, they are not our enemies, really. They are our friends, because they want to decompose this decaying tissue and return it back to earth. This is what they do. Like in our environment, when we see the tree fall down and it's being consumed by the mold, it's because it needs to be in order to return back into earth, into the ground, right? But what we also see is that the higher basilic mushrooms are controlling the fungi. So the fungi doesn't jump on the living beings. This is what the mushrooms do. This is how the mycelium is actually functions. There are lower molds and fungi, and there's higher basilic mushrooms that control it, because mushrooms and fungi is the same family. And this is why the recent studies actually find that mushrooms is the way to neutralize some oncological conditions and mutation and controlling of the fungal growth inside the body. So this is why the fungal therapy is very popular now, becoming very popular, because this is where the secret to controlling the cancer actually may be found. So these conditions, they create the inflammation, and this is where we actually end up with inflammation. About proteins, complex high molecular animal proteins that are denatured by cooking, because obviously we don't eat raw meat. I mean, not we, but just people. When they cook it, they create the tighter bonds of this polymeric molecular structure of the protein. The bonds are harder to break down now. It's found that the crocodile, when it eats the raw frog, the frog is dissolved by the enzymes in the crocodile's stomach within like 30 minutes. It's gone all the way, even the bones. When they feed crocodile the cooked frog, it stays there for 3 days, and then not all of it is digested. This is how the proteins get denatured and hard to digest. When people eat that, do not disassemble the proteins all the way down to the nutrient, which is the amino acids. This is what we really need. And only 9 essential amino acids. This is all the proteins that we need. The rest of the amino acids our body is capable of producing on its own. But if the complex high molecular proteins denatured get inside our digestion, first of all, they produce higher acidity in the stomach. They do not break down completely. They move on. And especially if they're consumed with carbohydrate, this confuses the body completely. Carbohydrates do not digest in our stomach. They need to proceed down into the small intestine for their digestion. If they're mixed with proteins, the proteins are automatically pulled from out of the stomach into the small intestine. And what happened in the small intestine is that there's an enzyme trypsin, which is not as potent as pepsin and the hydrochloric acid inside the stomach. And those high molecular proteins do not get disassembled. However, the fragments, they get inside the bloodstream through the leaky gut, let's say. Most of them, of course, removed, but some part of it is pulled inside the circulation with chyle through the lymphatic pathway, and abscess may develop inside the liver too. But once they get in the bloodstream, there is no way that it can go on any further digestion inside the blood. So they automatically become antigens, because they're not amino acids, but they're fragmental structures of another living being tissue, and they cannot participate in the tissue reconstruction of that individual who consumed this type of protein. Now, the body needs to produce macrophage number of immune cells in order to break that antigen down and eliminate it. And to produce those immune cells, we also need to invest a lot of energy, a lot of our own proteins into it, because the immune cells are also proteins, and they're also essential fats. So a lot of reserves, energy reserves, material reserves, our body has to yield in order to neutralize those antigens. And in fact, that actually is the basis for inflammation, because that reaction antigen antibody is ongoing. That leads to toxic waste accumulation inside the body, and sooner or later, the person will end up having the oncological condition. If they don't have heart attack or a stroke before that, the last chapter would actually be oncological condition. This is pretty much one way street. But there is another detour for metabolism, which we may talk about, because as I said, there's not just one metabolic mode that our body is capable of, and there's number, and maybe in one of such webinars we'll discuss how we harness energy. Yes, so this is the subtle body, and I think that's important to know too, because our subtle body, and Irina was talking about
in relation to inflammation.
Well, yes, because inflammation, again, though it is mostly physical, right? But the roots are still in the mind, because we are craving certain things, we're used to certain things, and don't want to recognize the reality, because we want to entertain our senses, and just we prefer to stay in the illusion versus recognizing the truth. And the truth is that we don't need animal proteins to live. So it is an illusion. It's actually proved, well, no matter from what perspective you look. And somebody may say that, the blood type thing and so on. I have blood type O, which is considered to be carnivore, and I am not carnivore and not been one for a while, and I'm thriving on the nutrition. So blood type has nothing to do with it. People make mistakes, and this is why they fail on plant-based nutrition, on the raw nutrition. And it's not about nutrition itself, it's because people just fail. They're not ready, they're not mentally ready, they don't possess enough knowledge, they don't practice it correctly, and this is why they fail. But it has nothing to do with nutrition itself. This is where the root is. Now, let's talk about the mental body a little bit. The mental body is called Manamaya Kosha in Ayurveda. That is the sheath of the mind. It's the subtle body. Our subtle body is electromagnetic field, whereas the ether or magnetic field is the pranamaya kosha. This is where the magnetic shift happens. And then the electrical body is the mental body, because we know that our mind is just a bunch of electricity somehow conducted throughout the body. Within the physical body, we have the silhouette, which outlines our physical body. That is called the subtle body or the mental body. In Sanskrit, it's called chitta. So chitta really is the subconsciousness. This is when I was saying that limbic system, which is in the brain, is not particularly the subconsciousness, it's just the interpreter of subconsciousness. But subconsciousness is the entire body. So if you want to know where your subconsciousness is, all you need to do is look in the mirror. And it has peripheral and central realm. The central is the chakras. We kind of touched upon them, but there's a lot more to say about chakras. And then we have the peripheral realm, which consists of nadis, marmas, and marmanis in the energy field, in which we collect the impressions. And these impressions, either their distorted perception of reality to some point, they may be positive, over exaggerated, or they may be negative, underestimated, or not perceived correctly. Even too much exaltation and joy may not be an indicator of correct reaction. It also over-exaggerated and not the correct perception of reality. These distortions, they're called samskaras. They are tight or soft fields inside of our electromagnetic field that are underlying the physical tissue inside the body. And where this field, sankara, is formed, there the physical tissue will relate to it and be compromised. Yes.
Those tight knots in your shoulders or the neck or your back, so those are actually samskaras on the
When the masseuse does a massage and he says that here you have some bumps, those bumps they interpret as the salt deposits, but that is the tightening of the tissue where the samskara is. This is really in the mind. And these areas are jeopardized, and they are the points where the inflammation may happen. Either inflammation or some dense formation of dense tissue. This is where the pus may actually, the cyst of pus may grow into. And this is where the oncological tumors usually would develop. The oncological tumors would develop in those areas where the samskaras are formed inside the mental body. And those samskaras are properly distributed through the chakras, because the samskaras are formed based on the emotional perception, mental perception, and then this field is actually formed somewhere in the mental body appropriately to how the emotion and mind worked at the time of its formation. And that samskara will affect the chakras rotation, because all chakras are rotating in a certain direction at a certain speed. If the samskara forms at a certain level of that chakra in certain organ, it will slow it down or speed up its rotation. It will always be conducting the energy of the emotion through that chakra, and that chakra will always communicate that with the mind. And then the mind will always be hooked to that samskara in this trend of craving or aversion. In this duality. Samskara is the basis for duality. It is the impression of previous experiences, as we mentioned here. It is the mental pre-programming. When you wonder, okay, why do I think this? Why do I crave it? It comes from the subconsciousness, unconscious, but this is the samskara at work. The unconscious realm, these trends are coming from, and they dictate our desires, choices, behaviors, and we can actually pinpoint those samskaras. There's certain ways that we can scan for those samskaras and eradicate them. And this is what the art of yoga actually should lead us to, being able to eradicate these duality samskaras from the mental body. This is one of the ultimate goals of yoga, is to eradicate samskaras. Even when we do asanas, we look for the areas in the body that produce the pain. Samskara communicates with the body through the sensation. If we have sensation of any sort, that means there's samskara. If we have pain, tingling, if we have some numbness, any of the sensation inside the mental
Right spots.
it is where the samskara is. So the yogis, when they do asanas, twist their body so extensively, they find the area of pain. They know this is where samskara is. Then they sit in meditation. They pinpoint their mind. They focus their mind in that area, and they work on dissolving that samskara by increasing the flow of chi into that area. There's special meditation techniques to do particularly that. The next slide, which is the cardiovascular system now. The cardiovascular conditions majorly are based on stress, and they're based on the internal pollution of the vascular system, which is the arterial plaques, atherosclerosis, formation of clots inside the blood vessels. What's remarkable about them is that the free radicals actually damage the blood vessel lining inside, as you see here on the first image. See that little crack made by free radicals? Why free radicals and what free radicals? Some say free radicals come from too much of oxidation because they don't eat properly, like a lot of sugar, for example, inappropriate foods, and there we go, end up with free radicals. But I can tell you that the main producer of free radicals is the imbalanced emotion. Imbalanced emotion shifts the magnetic field, and there we end up with free radicals. The ions that are improperly charged, they lack electrons in their structure. And what they do, they take those electrons from the lining of the blood vessels. Why? These free radicals, because their surges from the emotions come from the heart, because heart is the organ that expresses the emotions, because our mind produces logic, but the heart produces the emotion. Even though that emotion may come from different chakra, but it will be expressed through the heart in the physical reality. And once those surges of improperly charged ions come out of the heart, they rip the electrons of the lining of the heart. And this is why, first of all, heart suffers. Coronary arteries suffer first. And this is where these cracks form. The cracks in the vessels form, and then they need to be repaired. How's the body repairing them? Is by mortar and concrete. In this case, the mortar is cholesterol and the concrete is calcium. Calcium and cholesterol. And the whole bunch of other stuff which is flowing inside the blood. Some minerals, some waste products, which is 30% fibrinogen, glycoproteins, which is the decaying tissue of cellular debris, gets inside this plaque, but primarily it is the calcium and it is the cholesterol. This is why our liver produces a lot of cholesterol. Cholesterol on its own is not a bad thing. It is like the repair
Material.
like the drywall mud, to cover the cracks. And what happens next is, and that happens because of stress, because of too much emotions. And nowadays we see emotional people everywhere. Hardly anybody has no emotions. Emotions is the language of the body. It's not the language of the mind. Body expresses through the emotion. Emotion is a very powerful thing. Emotional eating, emotional buying, and emotion is the property of sankara. Remember? Craving and aversion. This is how we're damaging our heart, because we overproduce the emotion, and the emotion is a great surge of energy. We're wasting a lot of energy that otherwise we can use for some other more constructive purposes. And what happens further is that these plaques are not only in the major vessels, but they are also in the tiny capillaries, like in arterioles, at the level of the tissue, because each and every cell of each and every tissue needs to receive some blood, right, for oxygen and for nutrients. And imagine if that tiny vessel, which goes towards individual cell, is becoming clogged by this microplaque, then what happens? We end up with a cellular perfusion resistance. Imagine it's like another term for like insulin resistance, but this is in case of diabetes. And here we have the cellular perfusion resistance. where the tissue is not receiving oxygen and not receiving nutrition. So what the body needs to do in this case, it needs to increase the blood pressure in order to kind of push the blood through those narrow passages. And here where people end up with high blood pressure, which is another concern of the heart condition, which is of course is on the rise, and the causes of high blood pressure are argued. And of course there are few, but this is the main one and most concerning one. So I guess at this point, just, basic terms for the cardiovascular system. And I think at this point we can round it up.
Yes, I suggest that we wrap it up.
Yeah.
Let's recap real quick what we have been discussing as far as the natural remedies to fixing the digestive disorders, heart situations, and inflammation, right? Inflammatory conditions. So it's basically about pacifying your mind, improving the flow of prana, and raising the level of consciousness. Simple as that, right? So how do we do that? There are completely natural ways to do that, and there are plentiful. So you'll just need to see what works better for you. So it's getting out in nature. It's engaging in physical labor that brings benefit to others. It's cleaning, decluttering, and organizing. It's the good quality plant-based nutrition, mindfulness when it comes to all facets of life, including how we eat, what we eat, in what state of mind do we eat. It's the dosha-specific recommendations that Dr. Nature has been extensively talking about. It's the seasonality factor, foods that we put on our plate. It's the spices that we use. It's the kind of exercise that we engage in specific for each dosha.
Yeah.
Yoga and the rest of this list is extremely important. It's the yoga, meditation, I mean asanas. So asanas, meditation, and shatkarmas, so purification or detox, speaking the modern language. So those three, I would single them out as the most important factors in remedying any health condition. And of course, mantra Om, a universal mantra, most respected mantra, I would say. It's the reading of the ancient texts. And of course, it's taking the time to go to retreats such as Vipassana. It really impacts your consciousness as well. And as soon as you detox, your level of vibrations just ascends. Meditation and other parts and limbs of yoga, it all supposed to lead to peace of mind. So let's all be practicing that. And speaking of yoga, there is a wonderful place in the Chicagoland, actually in Chicago itself, Yoga Body Elements Studio. Cindy, would you like to say a few words about your studio and what classes you offer? I'm sure you do it online as well.
Sure. Thank you for asking. Yes, we are located physically in Chicago, Illinois, in the city in the Uptown neighborhood. We've been there for 10 years, and we do offer in-person and virtual. And we are a frequency wellness center, so we have a biocharger, NG, an iTaurus, and infrared biomats. But along with that, we do have yoga classes, massage, Reiki, cacao ceremonies, work with Young Living essential oils, breath work, and we also love to collaborate. And our community give is the Uptown Wellness Festival. And we love to, I love to bring collaborators in, professionals that are passionate, like these two that spoke this evening, to share their wisdom, their knowledge, their training with Chicago and beyond. So would love to have you visit. Again, grateful to have this opportunity to collaborate with you two tonight and also again on November 3rd. So thank you.
If you find this video helpful, please give it a like, share it with your family and friends, subscribe to our channel, and get notifications. Also, leave a comment of at least 8 words. Comments make difference.